Hello everybody, and welcome to this month's Posit Team Workflow demo. It's been a few months since I last gave one of these demos, so if this is the first time we're meeting, my name is Ryan Johnson and I'm a data science advisor here at Posit. So in today's workflow, we are going to focus in on PDFs, which is a file format we've probably all encountered at some point. Now we're going to kick off the demo talking about what are PDFs and why are they such a popular method for sharing documents. And then we'll jump into the actual demos where we'll demonstrate how to create some really beautiful, scalable, professional PDFs using a combination of Posit's open source tools and our professional tools. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so just a few slides here to get started. And the first thing I want to talk about is, what is PDF, which stands for Portable Document Format, particularly why is it so popular? So if you've ever been in a situation where you had to share a document with somebody, you probably had to stop and think and consider what is the optimal format for sharing this document. For example, if my document's in a Microsoft Word document and I want to share it with somebody else, you probably ask some questions to yourself like, does that person also have Microsoft Word? And if so, do they have the same version or at least a relatively recent version or similar version to what I have? Maybe if they don't have Microsoft Word, will it also work in Google Docs? We're not sure. So maybe you try a different format and you want to create an HTML document. So if you go to share an HTML document with somebody, you have a whole new set of questions such as, what internet web browser will they use to open up this document, which is essentially a web page? Are they going to use Safari, Firefox, Chrome, and depending on what browser they use, it may render slightly differently. Now, for a lot of these HTML formats, they require some system dependencies, such as JavaScript. So if they go to open an HTML document and they don't have JavaScript installed, will it render appropriately? We don't know. Also, if you go to try to email an HTML document to somebody, a lot of email clients will actually block emails that have HTML files as attachments. So that's something else you need to consider. And then particularly important for today's demo, what if we want to share a document that's created using something like Jupyter Notebooks or Quarto or Markdown? So if we go to share one of these documents, does that recipient also have R and Python installed? And can they even open up these documents? And if so, do they have the same package versions and language version that I do to ensure that it's the exact same document and it's rendered the exact same way when they open it up on their system? So that's a lot of questions to answer. And this really is the driving force behind why PDFs were created, because they are perfect for cross-platform compatibility. So if I create a PDF on my Mac computer and I go to share it with somebody using a Windows machine, I can be pretty confident it's going to render exactly the same because it preserves formatting, which is really important. PDFs is also something known as a what you see is what you get format, meaning the content won't shift, reflow, or break apart when opened on different devices. So unlike formats such as Word, where formatting can change depending on the software or device, things are just going to stay pretty consistent with PDFs. PDFs are also, by default, non-editable. So if you go to share it with somebody, they're really not going to be able to edit it. Now, there are some ways you can edit a PDF, but usually by default, they're not editable. And they're also print ready. So if you receive a PDF, you can typically file print, and that printed output will look pretty good. And there's a whole lot of other reasons why PDFs are so popular for sharing documents. Now, most software for creating documents has some type of built-in PDF export option. But when it comes to the creation of specialized documents that include things like mathematical equations, symbols, citations, other complex structures like chapters, sections, table of contents, journal formats, for example, complex tables and figures, chances are you're likely going to come across a tool called LaTeX. Now, in full disclosure, I have never wrote LaTeX code, so I can't speak too much to how complex it is. But from what I heard, it is a fantastic tool, but it does have some complications, some limitations. Now, fortunately, many of the open source tools that we'll work with today have methods to create PDFs without ever having to know how to code in LaTeX. But there are some newer tools out there for creating PDFs, which we'll discuss later on today, that actually have no dependency on LaTeX. For now, let's start with tools that have been around for years in R, and that's R Markdown. We are going to create a PDF report using R Markdown, but to do this, we need some data to report on. So I'm going to be using the Gapminder dataset, and some of you may be familiar with this, especially if you were at our conference in 2024. We actually had a keynote completely dedicated to the Gapminder dataset. But the reason why I like to use it in my demos is that it's pretty simple. It has about 1,700 or closer to 1,800 rows, but it only has 7 columns. And you can see those 7 columns here. So on the left-hand side, we're looking at country and the continent that country is in. We have the year, and then we have life expectancy, which is the life expectancy for someone born that year from that country. We have the population for that year and also the GDP per capita. Now, this data set is actually ideal for this workflow because it allows us to demonstrate how to create a template PDF and efficiently generate multiple PDFs for each country in a customized time frame. So this is kind of a pictorial demonstration or image of what we're going to be doing, at least to start. We're going to create a template R Markdown document, and this single R Markdown document is going to be used to generate any PDF we want for a specific country and also for a specific date range. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and switch over to Posit Workbench, and we'll show you the template R Markdown that we're going to be focusing in on. All right, so here I am within the home screen of Posit Workbench, and you can see I currently have an RStudio session running. Let's go ahead and click into it. And within this RStudio project, which I've called R Markdown PDF, you can see I have a few files down here. We're going to start with this basic R Markdown document. This is going to be our template document. So once I click on it, let me go ahead and walk you through what you're seeing here. So at the very top, we have our YAML, and we're going to focus in just on a single country to start. And we'll do the United States. And importantly, you can see right here, the output is PDF document. So this is the output that when we click knit here at the very top, it'll generate a PDF using LaTeX. All right, I've set some chunk option parameters here. And then in this first code chunk, we're going to load some packages. And again, we're focusing on the United States. And for the Gapminder dataset, we can also choose the date range. Now, the Gapminder dataset goes from about 1952 to 2007, so we'll just encompass the entire date range. So I'll go ahead and run this code chunk by clicking the play button. And while this is running, finishing up running, the next code chunk here is just going to generate a map. Just because I thought it'd be interesting or nice to have on the document an actual image of where does this country live in the world. So I'll click play here. And this is the output from that code where you can see the United States is highlighted here in blue. I've also included just some text here to replicate what a typical document would include, both figures, tables, but also some text. All right, down here we're going to create a table, and this table is going to be created using the very popular package in R known as GT. If you've never used GT before, it's a fantastic package for creating really nice tables in R, and there's also an equivalent in Python called Great Tables, which you can check out. So this table is going to summarize all of the columns for that specific country for the United States. So let's go ahead and run it and just take a look at this table. So here you can see the United States overview, and then by year we get life expectancy, and I've also color coded it here, which will be important a little bit later on. And then I have the population. You can see the nice syntax here with millions, and GDP per capita is the last column. And it's a really nice looking table, and this is kind of showing this HTML output. And it's really important to just take a mental note of what this looks like right now, because as you'll see in a little bit, it's actually not going to be as conserved when we render to a PDF. All right, so we have some more text down here, and then we're going to create some plots using ggplot. So this first plot right here, I'll click play, is showing the United States life expectancy, which is shown here in this orange line, compared to every other country in the world over time. And we can generate a similar plot for population. So here we have the United States population compared to every other country in the world as these light gray lines over time. And then finally, we can do this for GDP per capita. And you can see where United States falls with respect to every other country. So now we have these nice plots, we have a table, we have some text. Let's go ahead and render this document as a PDF using the LaTeX. So after I click knit here, you can see some logs being printed here in this render tab within our studio. So we'll give this just a few seconds to run. All right, let me go ahead and bring it onto my screen here so you all can see it. And here's that final PDF. And it looks pretty nice. Let me zoom out a little bit so we can take a look. So we see our plot here is nice and conserved right at the top. Here's some text. And then here's our GT table. And it still looks pretty good, but it definitely looks a little different from the HTML version when we ran it within our Markdown document. And the rest of the document, again, looks pretty nice. The text looks good. Here's some of those images that are nicely embedded. Another image, and there we go. All right, so we're going to use this our Markdown document to basically, again, be our template so that we can input additional countries and additional time frames. So let me go ahead and just quickly come back to the slides here. All right, so now that we've created this template, our Markdown, let's talk about using this our Markdown as a template for additional PDFs. Again, especially if I want to change the country or change the date range. So currently I have this hard-coded in the document. You can see here on lines 22 and 23, if I have a specific country focus, I have to add it as a variable here in this our Markdown document, and similar for a date range. Now, it'd be really nice is that instead of hard coding this, we could add these variables as parameters to this our Markdown. Because again, maybe someone else wants to view a different country or a different date range. And coming into the our Markdown and forcing someone to actually delete United States and type in their own country, and the same thing for the date range, how can we make the variable selection process better, more enjoyable? So that's where parameterized Markdowns come into play. So what I'm showing over here on the left-hand side is an expanded YAML. So again, the YAML is that very top chunk at the within our Markdown document. So we're still generating a PDF document, but here starting on line 3, you can see I'm defining some parameters. Specifically, I have my date range, where I have some default values. We're gonna make it a slider bar. We have min, max, and a few other things as well. And then we also have country focus. And similarly, we'll make this as like an input, like a select input. And we're gonna make all the various choices, the various countries in the Gapminder data set. So once we've defined these parameters within this our Markdown YAML, there's actually a way when you go to knit this document, if you click the little drop down, instead of knitting to a particular format, you can say knit with parameters. And what that gives you is a really nice user interface for inputting parameters. So here you can see I can easily change the date range up here at the top, and then I can easily select a different country. And once I've selected these two, I can hit knit at the very bottom, and it will generate an additional PDF report. Let me go ahead and switch back to Posit Workbench, and we're going to demo parameterize our markdowns. All right, so I'm back in the same RStudio environment we were just in. I'm going to close out of our template, our markdown document, and I'm going to open up this other R markdown document you can see down here in my Files tab called Parameterized. So here's that same YAML that we just saw in the slides. And again, what this allows us to do is knit this document with parameters. So again, I click on this little drop down at the very top and select knit with parameters. And once we do that, we get a window here. Just give it a few seconds to boot up. And it gives us the two input options. We have a slider bar to choose our date or year range, and we can also select a different country. So just to make things interesting, let's go ahead and change up the date range. So we'll just select, I'll go 1977 to 2002. And for a country, let's go ahead and just scroll up a little bit. We'll pick a random country. Let's do Cameroon, and I'll select knit. So now it's generating another PDF document using LaTeX, but it's going to generate this PDF for that specific date range and for the country Cameroon. So let's just give this a few seconds to run. All right, so now the PDF is created, it's rendering. And here we are. So now you can see Cameroon is highlighted. And if I just scroll down a little bit, you can see the PDF still looks pretty nice. And importantly, you can see our table here. It's only showing the dates for which we selected. So within that slider bar date range, we have years 1977 going up to 2002. So that's how we can create parameterize our markdowns. Now we can actually take this document and we could publish it to Posit Connect. But before we do that, I want to come back to the slides and again, talk about that table issue that we mentioned earlier. All right, so going back to the table that we created with the GT package in our Markdown, this is what we want. This is that nice HTML output, but this is what we got when we rendered it to PDF using LaTeX. And again, it looks okay, but the formatting is not quite what we want. So this is a good introduction to a tool called Typst. And if you've never heard of Typst before, it is an open source markup-based typesetting system very similar to LaTeX. And it's designed to be as powerful as LaTeX while being much easier to learn and use. Now, Quarto, one of our other open source tools for creating scientific documents, it includes the Typst command line interface, so there's actually no separate installation of Typst required. What that means is that when you install Quarto, Typst is already baked into it. And this is actually different from how LaTeX works. Typically, when you want to generate a PDF using R Markdown and LaTeX, you do need to install LaTeX or some version of LaTeX outside of R. Typst is also, it has super fast render times, and you can easily create highly customized templates. So the next couple slides here is just a show and tell showing you some of these really cool templates that you can create. For example, if you're creating any type of journal article for a scientific journal, you can build that with Typst, as shown here. This is one that I'm particularly excited for. So I came from an academic background where I had to present posters at various conferences. And what you can actually do now using the Typst integration within Quarto is create scientific posters as shown here. You can even do something as simple as create letters and maybe even flyers. So for example, for your chemistry department, here's a really nice flyer you can build using Typst within Quarto. So Quarto in version 1.5, which is the most recent version as of today, it now allows HTML tables, such as what we're seeing over here on the left-hand side, with custom CSS styling to be output in Typst. So instead of the table looking like this, we can now have it look like this when it gets rendered to PDF. So we're going to switch back to Posit Workbench again. We're going to open up a Quarto document and show you some of this Typst integration. And I'm also going to demonstrate how you can render a Quarto document with parameters in a similar fashion we did with the R Markdown document. All right, so here we are back in Posit Workbench, and I've actually switched to a separate RStudio project called Quarto Typst. And within this project, I have a document called quartodoc.qmd, which is what you're seeing up here in the top left quadrant. So in this Quarto document, you can see up here at the very top, we have a very similar YAML to what was in the R Markdown document. But here we're going to render this Quarto document. So you render Quarto, you knit R Markdown documents, but we're going to render it to this Typst format. And I've added some specifications you can see here. You can also see here, starting on line 11, I'm adding in some parameters, specifically country focus with the default of Peru, and the date range from 1952 to 2000. So if I wanted to render this document with parameters, we don't have that same dropdown we had with R Markdown, but instead we can do it from the terminal using Quarto's command line interface tool. So I'm going to go ahead and select the terminal here, and we are going to run the Quarto CLI tool to render this document, which is quarto.qmd, or quartodoc.qmd. And then we're going to feed in some parameters to this line here. So to do that, we're going to give -P, that's our argument for parameters, and we'll give it the country focus parameter to start. We'll have a colon, and I'm just going to pick Canada as another country someone might be interested in. And then for another parameter, we're going to add in our date range. And I'm just going to switch it up from the default, so I'm going to go ahead and select 1977 to 2002. And I'll close off that bracket. And once I hit enter, that will render this Quarto document. But again, it's going to render a PDF using the Typst integration. So we'll just give this a few seconds. All right, and it actually rendered it here within my file directory. So if I click on this Quarto doc PDF, here is our new PDF document created using Typst. So here we have Canada, and again, you can see the country highlighted, but probably the most important thing here is the table. And you can see the formatting looks almost identical to the HTML format that we're really kind of desiring. So this looks really good. And this is, again, just highlighting some of the new features within Quarto where you can have some of these HTML custom CSS directly within your PDF documents. All right, so let's come back to the slides here, and we'll move on to the next workflow. All right, so to finish up today's workflow, we're going to essentially create a Shiny application which replicates that user interface we saw with R Markdowns for selecting the various parameters. So because that feature doesn't, at least yet, exist within Quarto, we're going to create a custom Shiny application, which is shown over here on the right-hand side. This is at least the user interface. And you can see it's simply nothing special. It's just a series of inputs. So we have a drop-down for the various country. We have our date range, which we're used to. But I've also added in some extra flair with the help of the Typst integration, which gives users the ability to download either a document PDF or they can actually download a poster PDF. So simple as clicking a button and then selecting download PDF report, a user can then download whatever document they desire. So we're going to go ahead and show you this Shiny application, and then we'll wrap things up by publishing it to Posit Connect and showing you how you can then share the Shiny application with your coworkers or whoever you would like. Okay, so here I am within that same RStudio project, but this time I opened up this app.r file, which is what you're seeing up here in the top left quadrant. And just as a side note, we'll be sure to include all this source code in a GitHub repository, and we'll make sure you all are aware of it. But let me just quickly run through some key features in this Shiny application. So at the very top, we're defining our user interface, and here are all those various inputs that we just saw in the slides. So we have a selecting input for country, slider for our date, radio button so that you can change the format, and here's our download button. Now, if you scroll down to the server function starting on line 27, just to highlight right here, this is where we take the inputs from our Shiny application and create a list of parameters, which will eventually be fed into the Quarto render function. So depending if they have documents selected or if they have poster selected, it'll render either the Quarto doc QMD or the Quarto poster.qmd, and will feed in the custom parameters based on the various inputs the user selected. So we could run this application here locally within Posit Workbench here in our studio, but what I'm actually going to do is publish it to Posit Connect. Now there are a variety of ways you can publish to Posit Connect, but probably the quickest and fastest way to get something hosted on Posit Connect is to click this blue button here at the top of your screen. So once I've clicked that, we'll get this menu here to define all the files over here on the left-hand side that need to be included in this deployment bundle. And to briefly go through them, here are the top three. These are various extensions, well, it's one extension for the poster format. So this poster format was actually downloaded as a Quarto extension, so we have to make sure we include that. Here's our Shiny application. We're also going to include a PNG logo for Posit Team. And then we also need those reports, the Quarto doc report and the Quarto poster report. I'm going to be publishing it to an instance of Posit Connect, which I've already connected to. And I've actually previously published this, so I'm just going to go ahead and update the same piece of content. So once I hit publish, it's going to go pretty quick. Here's my deploy tab that opens up. And what's happening is that it's capturing all of my dependencies in my environment here within our studio. So what packages I'm using, the versions of those packages, and what R version. Once it replicates that environment on Connect, it can then deploy the Shiny application. And we'll just give it a few more seconds to render. All right, it's almost done, and here it is. Again, not a very flashy Shiny application, but let's go ahead and give it a test. So I'm going to go ahead and select a different country, so I'll just pick one randomly. I'll do Mexico. I'll just briefly tweak some of the dates here so we can see those effects on the output table. And let's go ahead and start with a document. So I'll click Download PDF Report. And we get this little status bar at the bottom of our screen, and we'll just give this a few seconds to build this custom report. All right, so it actually downloaded to my personal computer, so I'm going to go ahead and open it up and make sure you all can see it here. And here we go. We see Mexico's highlighted, and then you can see the table for the statistics here are within the date range that we've selected here at the table. So this looks really good. A really easy way for someone to create a custom PDF report, again, using Shiny, using the Typst integration. But if we wanted to have someone create a poster instead, let's go ahead and select a different country. Let's do Indonesia, and we'll just do the full date range, and I'll select poster, and then we'll go ahead and download this as a PDF report. Again, this is going to download to my personal computer here, so let's give this a few seconds. And let me resize it so you all can see it. Here we go. So here's Indonesia. You can see the map. It's a little small. We can certainly tweak this if you want to go a little deeper into it. Here's our table down here in the bottom left, and we get this nice academic research poster. And you can even define the authors with the Posit Department of Awesome. So just to round out the demo here, again, when you have a piece of content like a Shiny application hosted on Posit Connect, ultimately, you want to be able to share the Shiny application with whoever you want. And that's where these access controls come into play. So here I can click this little gear icon, which brings up my content controls, including access control. I currently have defined specific users or groups. And so currently in this configuration, I'm the only one that can view this content. But if I wanted to share it with, say, a colleague or potentially a group of users at my company, I can just add them here. So let's see if Rachel is actually on here. She is. So I can select Rachel. And now we are the only two people here at Posit that can view this content. But we have some other sharing settings, like all users login required. So if someone has access to Posit Connect, they'd be able to view this content, which is a great way to share content internally within your group, but no one outside of your company. And then if your license allows for it, there's the ability to share an interactive piece of content, like a Shiny application, with anyone in the world. And the only thing you would need to do to share this content is grab the URL you see at the top of your screen. It's not the prettiest URL. It's got some random letters and numbers in it, so we can customize it. I can come down here at the bottom right and say Gapminder PDF generator. And then create this custom report, save it in this configuration, and now to share this application with anyone, all I have to do is copy this URL and send it to somebody just like you would share any other website. All right, so I hope today's demo was helpful and that you now have a better understanding of the features within Posit's open source and professional tools for creating custom PDFs and sharing them with the world. If you have any questions, then stick around and we'd be happy to answer them during the live Q&A. Thanks, everybody.